Have you ever noticed that the more spiritually you awaken, the harder it becomes to get along with certain people? It's as if the atmosphere becomes heavy, the shallow conversations tire you out, and you simply no longer have the patience to deal with the social theater everyone insists on maintaining. And the strangest thing is that the more you try to fit in, the more out of place you feel, as if you're in a place that no longer belongs to you. But what if I told you that this isn't arrogance, nor is it your problem? It's a sign of evolution. What few people understand is that those who awaken spiritually begin to see the world in a way most still can't. Masks fall, illusions lose their charm, and what once seemed normal now feels false, forced, and tiring. This is why many run away, not from people themselves, but from the energy they carry. In this video, I'll show you why do the spiritually awakened run away from ordinary people, and you will realize that this separation has a much greater purpose than you imagine. Get ready, because what you'll understand here could completely change the way you view your relationships, your friendships, and even your role in the world. After hearing this, you'll never again feel guilty for preferring silence to the wrong company. Because maybe this isolation isn't loneliness, it's your call to the next level of consciousness. Now you understand why distancing yourself from certain people isn't weakness, it's strength. What you just heard freed you from the guilt of wanting peace and showed you that silence is also growth. This is true spiritual maturity, and when a message makes you see life more clearly, the least you can do is keep this cycle of awakening alive. So, like and subscribe to the channel, because here you'll always find truths that strengthen the soul, open your eyes, and remind you of the power of being different. You know that moment when you start looking at the world and everything seems different. The conversations that once excited you now seem empty. The people you called friends start to seem distant, and even the places that once made you feel good start to bother you. It's as if something inside you has awakened and nothing fits anymore. You feel like you've changed, but you can't quite explain what happened. It's strange because you're still the same person, but something has shifted in the way you see everything around you. This is the beginning of spiritual awakening, the point where you begin to see beyond what everyone else pretends not to see. Many people think that awakening is a moment of peace, of enlightenment, of calm smiles and closed eyes. But the truth is that the beginning is turbulent. It's when you realize how much you lived surrounded by illusions, appearances, people who wear masks every day. And it's painful because you realize that the world you knew was a performance. People say what they don't feel, do what they don't believe, and live, trying to fit into patterns that don't even make sense. And suddenly you can't participate in this anymore. It's not pride, it's not rejection, it's exhaustion. It's as if your mind says, enough, I can't pretend anymore. From then on, what once seemed normal starts to irritate you. The noise of people complaining about life, the obsession with money, status, gossip, the constant fear of being judged, it all starts to weigh on you. You begin to realize how much of your life has been wasted, trying to please those who never understood you. And the worst part is, when you try to talk about what you're feeling, almost no one understands. People look at you as if you're overthinking it or thinking too much. But deep down, you know that's not the case. You're just seeing something others can't yet see. This is the true break with the enchantment. It's the moment when the illusion falls and consciousness begins to act. You begin to realize that the system you live in is designed to keep you distracted, always too busy to think, always too tired to feel. And when you wake up, this becomes unbearable. The repetitive news, the bar conversations full of complaints, the people competing to see who suffers the most, it all starts to seem like a huge waste of time. And the curious thing is that the more you wake up, the more isolated you feel. But this isolation has a reason. It's not meant to punish you, it's meant to protect you. Because when you start to see clearly, you realize that most people are still asleep and don't want to wake up. And any attempt you make to show them this is seen as a threat. They criticize you, call you strange, different, too esoteric. But you're not trying to be any of those things. You're just trying to be real. And this is one of the greatest pains of awakening. Realizing that the truth scares those who live lies. From then on, something changes inside you. You begin to choose silence. You begin to prefer being alone rather than wasting energy trying to explain what others don't want to understand. You begin to feel at peace in your own space, without needing to prove anything to anyone. And this is where many people go wrong. They think you're running away, when in fact you're finding yourself. Because true awakening isn't about changing the world, it's about changing how you react to it. And you know what's most interesting? Deep down, a part of you longs to go back to the way it was, to be light, carefree, laugh at the same things, fit in effortlessly. But the more you try, the more artificial everything seems. You feel like your old life no longer serves you, but the new one is still under construction. It's like being between two worlds, the old, which no longer makes sense, and the new, which is still shapeless. And it's precisely in this gap that you begin to understand the true meaning of awakening. This first stage is the loneliest, but also the most important. It's here that you begin to ask yourself, what really matters to me? What is true and what is just repetition? It's here that you begin to free yourself from the need for approval, the fear of being alone, the emotional dependence on being surrounded by people. You begin to understand that peace and companionship are not the same thing, and that being surrounded isn't always the same as being connected. And this realization changes everything. It's normal to miss the simple things, but it takes courage to continue on this path, because those who truly awaken can no longer close their eyes. You can even try to go back to living as before, but something inside you won't let you. It's like trying to sleep again after seeing the light. And this light, however uncomfortable it may be at first, is what guides you to a more authentic life. And it's at this point that many people begin to distance themselves, not out of intention, but out of necessity. Because when your perspective changes, your relationships change too. And that's where one of the greatest pains and, at the same time, the greatest lesson for those who awaken arises. Understanding that not everyone will accompany you on this journey. Some will call you cold, others will think you've gone crazy. But deep down, the opposite is happening. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming more aware. And as this awareness grows, you begin to perceive something even deeper, something that almost no one talks about, but which explains a lot about what comes next. This is precisely what shows why the spiritually awakened distance themselves from so many people, and why this distance is actually a sign of evolution. But before I reveal this essential point to you, let me comment on the word wake up, so I know you're feeling this transformation too, because what comes next is what will really make you understand why certain connections simply don't survive when consciousness awakens. When awakening truly happens, loneliness stops being just a feeling and becomes an inevitable part of the process. And this is where many people get lost, because soon after waking up to reality, you begin to realize you're alone in a world that no longer seems to understand you. The people around you remain stuck in the same conversations, the same dramas and worries, while you're trying to deal with a whirlwind inside your head. It's as if you're seeing everything from above, observing the chaos, but no longer able to participate in it. At first, it hurts. It hurts because you feel like you've lost your place. But over time, you realize it's not a loss, it's a liberation. The curious thing is that this loneliness doesn't begin when you distance yourself from others. It begins when you no longer fit in. And no matter how hard you try, nothing feels natural anymore. You go to gatherings, parties, family conversations, and feel like you're physically there, but mentally elsewhere. People talk about problems that seem so small, and you want to scream. Don't you realize how irrelevant this is? But you don't, because you understand that everyone has their own time, and forcing someone to see what you've already seen is like trying to wake someone who still wants to sleep. This solitude is a watershed moment. It separates those who merely seek to be spiritual from those who truly awaken, because when you begin to enjoy silence, when your company becomes sufficient, it's a sign that something profound has shifted. You no longer need to be surrounded by others to feel complete. And this is what frightens many people around you, seeing you at peace without depending on anyone. Most live in fear of being alone, but those who awaken understand that silence is where the soul breathes. It's in silence that you hear what the noise of the world has always drowned out, your own inner voice. It's funny how before you ran from emptiness, and now you start searching for it. Before you wanted to be everywhere, participate in everything, and now you just want to be present where there is truth. This is the moment when awakening teaches you that solitude is not the absence of people, it's the absence of falsehood. And this discovery changes everything. You begin to understand that being alone is a privilege, not a punishment. It's in isolation that you reconnect with what truly matters and learn to differentiate between company and distraction. But don't think it's easy. Sometimes this phase is confusing and painful. You wonder if you're becoming cold, distant, or strange. There are moments when you miss old connections, even though you know they no longer serve you. And that's okay. This oscillation is part of life. It's your ego trying to pull you back to familiar comfort, while your soul pushes you to a new level of consciousness. And between these two forces, you mature. You learn not to depend emotionally, not to need anyone's approval to feel good. And this freedom is what truly scares those who still live on. Autopilot. The truth is that the awakened person withdraws not because they despise others, but because they feel everything more intensely. Conversations, energies, intentions, everything is perceived deeply. And this is tiring. Spending too much time in environments full of people disconnected from their own essence is like trying to breathe in an airless place. You feel the weight of emotional density, masks, and hidden competition, and understand that this is no longer your place. Solitude then becomes a refuge, a space where you recharge, understand, and observe. And the most beautiful thing is that over time, you begin to get used to this new way of existing. You discover that solitude isn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of everything. It's in solitude that you rediscover your essence, learn to truly listen to yourself, and begin to live according to what you feel, not what others expect. And when this happens, something curious begins to emerge. You notice the whole world changing its tone. The people who used to irritate you now arouse compassion. You understand that they're not bad, they're just asleep. And how can you judge someone who hasn't woken up yet? This understanding completely changes your perspective. You stop feeling like a victim and start seeing yourself as someone in transition, someone learning to exist on a new level. And it's precisely at this stage that the awakened person begins to attract new energy, new people, new situations, all more aligned with the frequency of their consciousness. But the most interesting thing is that before this happens, there's a stage that almost no one talks about, a kind of discomfort that appears whenever you try to return to normal life. And that's what we'll talk about next, because this discomfort is the clearest sign that your energy no longer matches that of the sleeping minds. Comment here. Loneliness. So I know that you've come this far and are feeling this transition firsthand, because what's coming next will make you understand once and for all the real reason behind this separation. There comes a point when you start to realize how noisy the world is. And I'm not just talking about the sound of the streets, the voices, or the loud music. I'm talking about the invisible noise, the one that comes from people's minds. It's the constant din of worries, comparisons, complaints, and judgments. It's as if everyone is talking at once, trying to prove something, justify something, dispute something. And when you awaken spiritually, this noise becomes deafening. You start to feel everything, the intentions, the repressed emotions, the weight of words spoken without thinking. It's as if your field of perception has expanded, and now you perceive even what others try to hide. And that, my friend, is exhausting, because the more sensitive you become, the more you realize how much people live on autopilot. It's that heavy energy in meetings, that awkward atmosphere when someone talks badly about someone behind your back. That smile you feel is fake. Before you didn't even notice. Now it seems like your entire body reacts. You feel tired, tense, drained. It's as if every superficial contact consumes a piece of your peace, and without really understanding why, you start avoiding certain conversations, certain groups, certain environments. It's not pride, it's self-preservation. You simply don't want to expose yourself to the noise of sleeping minds anymore. And the worst part is, the more you try to explain it, the less people understand. They think you're being antisocial or full of yourself. But it's not like that at all. You've just started to value what really matters, your energy. Because once you awaken, you begin to understand that not everyone deserves access to your time, your mind, your heart. And not because they're bad, but because they're stuck in a cycle you've already escaped. They still fuel the drama, the victimhood, the need for competition. You, on the other hand, just want peace. It's amazing how things that once seemed normal become uncomfortable. That conversation filled with gossip, that group of people who only complain about life, that friend who's always stuck in repetitive problems, All of this begins to feel like meaningless repetition, and the awakened mind, no matter how empathetic, can no longer feed on this. The awakened mind seeks depth, truth, purpose. It doesn't want to argue about time, but about the meaning of existence. It doesn't want to just chat, it wants to connect. And this difference creates a natural distance between you and the rest of the world. You realize that the external noise only exists because there's an internal void. People talk too much so they don't have to feel. They distract themselves so they don't have to think. They surround themselves with people so they don't have to face their own silence. And when you realize this, you begin to understand why the awakened need to distance themselves. Because while most run to escape themselves, the awakened want the opposite. They want to hear themselves. They want to understand what they feel. They want clarity. They want peace. And for that, they need space, silence, distance. This distancing, in fact, is inevitable. It's the only way to preserve your vibration in a world vibrating with chaos. Because when you try to remain in environments where the ego dominates, you feel the energy pulling you down. Conversations seem to drain you. People drain you without realizing it. And when you return home, you feel as if you've carried everyone's weight. That's when the awakened understand. Silence is healing, and that's why they prefer to retreat. But this decision comes at a price. The awakened person begins to be seen as too different, difficult to live with, closed, and it's curious because their heart hasn't changed, just their frequency. They still feel love, empathy, compassion, but now they choose where to place it. And it's precisely this choice that separates those who are asleep from those who are already awake. The awakened person no longer wants to participate in emotional games, no longer wants to feign interest, no longer wants to waste time on what has no soul. They want lightness, truth, and clean energy. And do you know what happens when you start protecting yourself like this? Your energy shifts, and people notice, even if they don't understand. Some naturally distance themselves, others try to provoke you to bring you back to their level. And that's where the true test of awakening begins, remaining calm even when the world tries to pull you back into chaos, because there's no point in having awareness if you don't know how to preserve it. Silence at that point becomes your best defense. So when you notice that certain people tire you out just being around them, that certain places drain you, or that certain conversations leave you confused and empty, don't blame yourself. This is just your body telling you that you no longer belong to that kind of energy. It's the universe letting you know that you've evolved. And most importantly, it's a sign that your awakening is taking hold. Now, what almost no one tells you is that this process has an even more profound consequence, something that completely changes the way you see yourself and how you relate to others. It's about letting go and ending the need for acceptance, something that completely transforms your way of life. But before we get into that, let's talk about the word energy, so I know you're connected all the way here. Because what comes next will show you the true power of those who have learned to step away from the noise and find strength in silence. When awakening begins to mature, something inside you changes completely. The need for approval disappears. That desire to please everyone, to be accepted, to fit in, it simply vanishes. And the strangest thing is that, at first, this can even scare you. You wonder, am I becoming cold? Am I becoming indifferent? But over time, you realize it's not coldness, it's freedom. You're just tired of living trying to be who they expect you to be. You finally understand that living to please others is the same as dying a little inside every day. And here's one of the biggest signs of awakening. You stop caring about the role the world has assigned you. Before, you worried about what others thought, what they would say, the image you portrayed. But now none of that makes sense anymore. Because you realize the world is full of people playing characters, trying to maintain an ideal version of themselves to get attention, status, or approval. And when you wake up, you can't continue playing this role anymore. Awakening makes you look at all this and think, what's the point? This is the moment when you understand, in practice, what detachment means. It's not about stopping loving. It's about stopping being dependent. It's about stopping measuring your worth by the eyes of others. It's about not despairing when someone walks away, because you understand that what's true always remains. And most importantly, It's about stopping bending over backward to fit into spaces too small for who you've become. Detachment is the courage to be yourself, even if it costs you company. And the most liberating thing is that when you let go of this need to be accepted, everything in your life begins to change. People who were only around out of interest disappear. Heavy environments become unbearable, and what remains is only the essential. You learn to value silence, simplicity, and alone time. You begin to feel comfortable in your own skin, and you realize that this feeling of lightness comes precisely from no longer needing to prove anything. You don't want to impress anyone. You want to live in peace. But of course, the world doesn't understand this kind of freedom. When you let go of expectations, many people get upset. They think you've changed, that you're distant, that you've lost your humility. But in reality, you've simply stopped playing the game. You haven't changed your essence. You've simply stopped participating in the collective lies that sustain society. And for those still trapped by them, this is frightening, because your authenticity exposes how much others live by appearances. This is why the awakened person, upon freeing themselves from the need for approval, naturally begins to distance themselves. They no longer need to force themselves to be where they don't want to be, nor feign interest in empty conversations. They realize that it's possible to love someone and still not need to be with them all the time. They understand that peace is more important than presence, that sometimes saying no is the greatest act of self-love. And, little by little, this new way of living becomes their default. You begin to enjoy doing things alone, without needing applause. You learn not to compare yourself, not to compete, not to seek validation. And the most beautiful thing about all this is that when you stop chasing acceptance from others, you begin to attract people who truly accept you. They don't come for what you appear to be. They come for who you are, because your energy changes. You exude tranquility, confidence, and truth. And these are rare qualities in a world where almost everyone is constantly trying to appear to be something they're not. But letting go isn't a switch you flip overnight, it's a process. Sometimes you'll still feel like slipping back into that old role, trying to please, trying to fit in. And that's okay. It's your ego trying to pull you back into your comfort zone. But now you know that comfort is a prison. You've already tasted the freedom of being you, and it's impossible to forget that feeling. From now on, your priority stops being fitting in and becomes making sense. And this change is profound. It redefines the way you relate, the way you speak, the way you behave. You start to listen more and react less. You learn to let people think what they want. You understand that no one owes you understanding, and that all that matters is being at peace with yourself. This is spiritual maturity. It's the point where you realize you don't have to choose between being good and being truthful, because kindness without truth is just submission in disguise. The most interesting thing is that when you reach this level, the energy surrounding you also begins to transform. People who still live in energetic chaos can no longer remain close. They feel uncomfortable around you, not because you judge them, but because your presence reveals what they still don't want to see in themselves. And this is precisely what paves the way for what comes next, which explains why the awakened can only connect with those who vibrate on the same wavelength. There comes a point when you realize it's no longer possible to connect with anyone. You try, you smile, you talk, but you feel something is different. The words don't seem to fit. The laughter sounds forced, and deep down, there's a feeling that you and the other person are in completely different worlds. It's strange because you don't feel anger or superiority. You just realize you're vibrating at a different frequency. And this isn't mysticism. It's physics. It's energy. Everything in the universe vibrates, including people. And when your energy changes, so does your tuning. You begin to notice that connections that once flowed now stall. Conversations no longer sparkle, encounters seem tiring, and what once felt good now drains you. This happens because your consciousness has expanded. The awakened can now see what lies behind words, intentions, repressed emotions, unconscious patterns, and the clearer you see, the harder it is to engage with the superficial. People may be smiling, but you feel the weight of fear, envy, and hidden anger. And without realizing it, your body begins to protect itself from this. That's why the awakened prefer to distance themselves. They don't run away from anyone. They simply seek environments where their energy doesn't have to constantly defend itself. Because talking to someone vibrating at a low frequency is like trying to tune into a radio station filled with noise. You might hear something, but the noise doesn't let you understand anything. Over time, you begin to choose silence over noise, solitude over confusion. And this isn't isolation, it's energetic maturity. The truth is that when you awaken, you begin to realize that life is driven by energetic exchanges. Every conversation, every presence, every glance is an exchange. And if you don't care for those who have access to your energy, you end up drained. That's why the awakened are selective. They no longer want to be in places where they have to pretend, smile reluctantly, or hold back their own light to avoid disturbing others. They prefer to have a few by their side who vibrate in the same rhythm than to be surrounded by many who leave them empty. And here comes one of the most beautiful parts of this process. When you stop seeking quantity and start prioritizing quality, the universe responds. New people start appearing out of nowhere, people who understand you without needing many words, who vibrate similarly, who talk about what truly matters. These are lighter, more genuine, even quieter connections, but with a profound meaning. You don't have to try, the energy flows. It's that wonderful feeling of being at home, even if you've only known the person for a short time. This is resonance. It's energy recognizing itself in energy. But to get to that point, you have to accept the distance from others, and that's one of the most challenging parts. Because your ego misses the old cycle, the people you know, the belonging. Sometimes you try to go back, try to fit in, but something stops you. The conversation seems repetitive, the atmosphere feels awkward, and in the end you understand. It's not that they've changed, it's you. And there's no going back to what you've already overcome. This is evolution. And yes, it hurts at first, but then comes a peace that can't be explained. You begin to see people differently. Instead of judging those who are still asleep, you begin to understand that everyone has their own time. The awakened person no longer tries to convince anyone, no longer tries to prove anything. They understand that consciousness doesn't impose itself, it inspires itself. That's why they talk less, observe more. They realize that every encounter is an exchange, and not every exchange is worth it. This is wisdom, and the curious thing is that this frequency shift also transforms the way others perceive you. Some distance themselves for no apparent reason, others start avoiding you, and you realize you don't need to do anything for this to happen. It's natural. Energy doesn't lie. It brings together those who vibrate the same and distances those who vibrate differently. And the awakened, by accepting this, becomes a point of light amidst the chaos. They don't try to change the world. They change their own vibration. And that alone is enough to transform everything around them. But there's something even deeper behind this selective behavior. Because over time, the awakened individual realizes that even understanding these energetic dynamics, they still have to deal with a major challenge, the emotional exhaustion caused by these exchanges. Energy is alive, and even unintentionally it mixes, influences, and wears itself out. And when the awakened individual doesn't learn to deal with this, overload sets in, that inexplicable fatigue, that weight on the chest, that feeling of carrying the world, and that's exactly what the next section is about. Before we get there, comment here the word frequency, so I know you're resonating with this message, because what comes next will show you why the awakened, even conscious, still needs to learn to protect themselves from the energies that surround them, and what happens when they don't. There comes a time when the awakened person understands that the problem isn't being with people, it's how much they surrender to them. Because as much as their consciousness has expanded, they still feel everything intensely. And this is beautiful, but also dangerous. The key, awakened person carries a sensitive heart, an extraordinary empathy, and because of this they absorb the pain, frustrations, and emotions of others without realizing it. They're like an energetic sponge. They feel what others feel, even when no one says anything. And this sensitivity, which seems like a gift, sometimes becomes a burden. This is why so many spiritually awakened people live tired, emotionally exhausted. They don't understand where the heaviness, the sadness, the discouragement comes from. They think it's something personal, but in reality, it's a reflection of what they've absorbed throughout the day. A heavy look, a negative conversation, a heavy environment, all of this leaves its mark. And the more the awakened person tries to help, the more they wear themselves out. They give of themselves, listen, welcome, try to understand, and in the end they feel drained. It's a paradox. The more light you have, the more you attract those living in darkness, seeking a little of it. But there comes a time when the awakened person understands that they can't save everyone. They realize that trying to carry the pain of others is like drowning to teach someone to swim. And that's where one of the greatest spiritual lessons comes in. Caring for one's own energy isn't selfish, it's wisdom. The awakened person begins to realize they need to preserve their field, set boundaries and say no when something isn't good. They understand they don't need to participate in every conversation or be everywhere. You begin to practice energetic detachment, the act of choosing where to place your own light. It is at this point that they learn to withdraw without guilt. Solitude ceases to be an escape and becomes rest. Silence ceases to be absence and becomes nourishment. And this change is transformative, because when the awakened learn to preserve their own energy, their presence becomes even more powerful. They begin to inspire rather than convince, to illuminate rather than argue, and simply to be. His vibration speaks for himself, but until then there's a process of pain and confusion. The awakened person wonders why no one seems to understand them, why they're always the different one, the too intense. And the answer is simple: because they feel what others repress. While most run from their own emotions, the awakened person faces them, and this makes them a mirror, a living reminder of everything people try to hide from themselves. That's why so many distance themselves from them, why so many judge them. Their presence, even in silence, makes others reflect on their own lies. This emotional exhaustion, as harsh as it may seem, has a purpose. It teaches the awakened person to master their energy. They learn not to react to everything they feel, to observe instead of absorbing, to protect themselves without closing themselves off. They learn to perceive when something is theirs and when it is merely a reflection of the environment. This discernment is what transforms them into someone truly conscious, someone who not only understands the world, but also knows how to move within it without getting lost. And it is at this point that the awakened discover a silent strength within themselves, a peace that depends on no one, a clarity unshaken by external chaos. They begin to walk through the world as if carrying a light that nothing can extinguish. And this is powerful because they stop fighting the darkness and begin to illuminate it simply by being who they are. This is the true mission of the awakened, not to escape the world, but to learn to exist in it without being contaminated. But there's something even deeper behind this energetic mastery, something few understand, and which completely changes the purpose of the awakened person's solitude. Because when they finally learn to control their energy, they discover that this solitary phase was never a punishment. It was preparation, training for something greater, a stage that enables them to fulfill the true reason for awakening. And that's exactly what you'll learn next. Now you understand what truly happens to those who awaken spiritually. You understand why isolation isn't weakness, but strength. This content has shown you that your solitude has a purpose, that your silence is protection, and that the peace you feel when you step away isn't a mistake. It's a sign of evolution. And when a truth like this touches the soul, it's impossible to keep it to yourself. So like and subscribe to the channel so more people awaken like you and find the same clarity you found here. Comment on the word "wake up" so I know this message truly reached you. And stay tuned, because the next video will take you even deeper. It will reveal what happens after the awakened one conquers their loneliness and begins to fulfill the true purpose of their light. What comes next is the turning point of the spiritual journey. You will understand that being alone was never the end. It was always the beginning of something much greater.